to 4.
Welcome to the Doug Bailey Radio Show. Here's Doug Bailey.
Well, Dee Snider's out with a brand new album called For the Love of Metal. And I'll tell you, I've heard it. I love it. You're going to love it as well. On the phone, I believe from Belize, is Dee Snider. Dee, welcome.
Great to be here. You know, there's nothing more exciting for a 63-year-old man to have a Billboard charting hit album.
How's it like to be back on the charts again? We were kind of chatting off air here. You were excited when you came on the phone.
Hey, you know what? Every review, and the reviews are just glowing, starts with this phrase, "I was not expecting this," and which I scream at the computer screen, "I wasn't expecting it either." This album really came out of left field. It started as a challenge by an amazing, he's a singer for the band Hatebreed. His name's Jamie Josta. A lot of people know him from Headbangers Ball years ago, and he challenged me to do a new contemporary metal record that he would produce, and I accepted the challenge. And I got to tell you, with no recording budget, no record deal, it was just like a Field of Dreams thing. If you record it, they will come. You know, we just went into the studio, and this thing came to life. It was a pretty amazing experience.
And I am, you said 63-year-old guy. I'm going to turn 50 in February, so I was there for the early Twisted Sister, and I was there listening through it through the 80s. Love the music that Twisted Sister has. And what you had just said, I was blown away by what I heard when I trekked through this album yesterday. It is on a little harder side of Twisted Sister, but not that much harder.
Well, you know, I was a songwriter for Twisted Sister, and I joined an existing band that went back in the 70s, and if anybody's seen the documentary We Are Twisted Blanking Sister, you know the band existed for 10 years before MTV found us, you know, so it was a long road. And they were born out of the New York Dolls, David Bowie, that era of the very early 70s. And when I joined, I liked that stuff, but I also was a headbanger. So as a songwriter, I kind of wrote music that was kind of a cross between metal and glitter rock, you know, glam rock. And that became known as hair metal.
Well, you could see that from the way you guys were dressed in the early 80s. I mean, I'm not saying anything bad about it because I loved it.
No, it was a blast. I have no regrets. A lot of people apologize for their past. I look at it and go, that was cool. That was cool. But, you know, so now as a solo artist, Twisted retired in 2016, I'm creating for my taste purely, and I'm a headbanger. I'm an OG metalhead. Day one, you know, I was there when it used to be called hard rock, and I helped destroy the Woodstock Nation. You're welcome. You know, this record is more reflective of my personal taste.
And let's step back to you just said when Jamie had challenged you, your producer, Jamie Josta, had challenged you to make that contemporary record. You rose to the challenge. How did you accomplish that?
You know, I got to give so much credit to Jamie, his team, his studio team, because I didn't have a band. So the Belmore brothers, Charlie and Nikki, who play with death metal band called Toxic Holocaust. I mean, these guys are as heavy as possible. Amazingly talented musicians who had played all the guitars, bass, drums in the studio. Nikki engineered, mixed it. You know, he co-produced, so it was a great team, but also there was this outpouring, as Jamie said there would be, from the metal community, members of Lamb of God, Disturbed, Killswitch Engage, Arch Enemy. They came out and contributed, worked on the record. They were fans of mine, and they believed what Jamie believed, is that my voice and my attitude has a place in the contemporary metal scene, and with the right music, I could take my place. And it seems like they did it.
And before we get into the first three songs on the album, I've trekked through it. But for those that is going to hear, for listeners that are going to hear this for the first time, what can they expect from the new album?
You know, what they expect is full-blown Dee Snider aggression. I mean, one of the things that Jamie said, and he says, Dee, your voice, I've seen you in concert, most singers are waning, you're as strong as ever. He says, you know, and people, we need that power. So this is a roaring Dee Snider, mad at the world. I'm not really mad at the world, but I'm screaming for everybody else who is, because I've made it through, but I feel like my job is to represent for others. So it's an onslaught. I mean, even the song about the passing of my mother is speed metal. It's aggressive and fast and pissed off. So for the most part, it's just a very aggressive, intense metal record.
And there are some soft points in there, if you can say Dee Snider sings soft there, but there are some harder edge points of your voice, which really doesn't go that much harder. And let's leave it at that right now. Let's get into the first part of the record. Let's hit the first track on the record. It's called Lies Are a Business. Do you want to set this song up for the listeners?
Yeah, when Jamie and I were developing the record, we talked a lot about the things I wanted to say and things I wanted to talk about. And this isn't about the fake news thing. This is about this is around the world. This is just lies are everywhere in corporate America, in politics, in day-to-day living, and it sucks for the little guy because we have to suffer through these things, and I just wanted to rail about it in the opening track.
And let's get to it. Lies Are a Business, the opening track on Dee Snider's brand new album, CD, download whichever way you want to call it, For the Love of Metal. Here you go. Well, you just heard track 3 from Dee Snider's new CD, For the Love of Metal, called I Am the Hurricane. Dee, I love the song. The first 3 songs on this CD ultimately just rock. You got to turn it up. Can you tell the listeners a little bit about I Am the Hurricane and kind of what that was all about, what your thinking was when you wrote that?
Well, we talked a little bit about Lies Are Business, and I'd just like to mention also a track we were talking about off the air while we were listening, and that is Tomorrow's No Concern. And that was the second track, and that was taken from my basic core belief. I'm a guy who's proud of my past, but I don't live there. I tell people my glory days are now. I'm always in the present. So tomorrow's no concern. I gave you yesterday. Tomorrow's no concern. I gave you yesterday. You can keep it because today is mine. And it's just my basic belief system. I Am the Hurricane is kind of classic Dee Snider, believe in yourself, fight back, don't take anything from anybody. And I think everybody needs that pep talk once in a while. So I Am the Hurricane is very much that pep talk.
Let's step back to Tomorrow's No Concern. And the way I got it, and that's why I was hoping that you would tell me what your thinking was in that. To me, when I first heard it, and especially that hook that I keep saying is still in my mind, that chorus, it's still in my mind, to me it was almost like Twisted Sister's behind, we're done. This is where I'm going today. This is my music today. This is my concern today. Is that wrong in thinking that way and now knowing what you're thinking was?
Absolutely not. Absolutely, you're absolutely right. That is why, it was picked actually as the first track we released was Tomorrow's No Concern, because it was this very big statement, from a guy who's known for Twisted Sister, and I've been around in the business for a long, long time, and it was a pretty bold statement, especially, and it's also very aggressive, it's fast, it's intense, it's powerful, it blindsided a lot of people because it was like a very bold statement.
But it's not over the top, Dee. It's not an over-the-top song. It hits you, it punches you, but it's not over the top.
The production, the incredible production job. Sonically, the record sounds great, and at the same time, it has melody, it's got a hook, it's got all those things, and people it was a sort of a battle cry for me. So yeah, and again, I'm proud of my past, but I don't live there. So at 63 years old, take inspiration. It's okay to say I'm going to do something different now. This is who I am today.
On the phone, Dee Snider, I believe, from Belize, right, Dee?
Yeah, we moved down to Central America and live on the beach. But
I find nothing wrong with that.
Yes, but I've been informed with the success of For the Love of Metal, I'll be spending very little time here as we move forward.
I tell you what, for you living in Belize, I will offer you a room in my house. You stay here for an Iowa winter. Then you will be like, oh my God.
One of those house swap things. That sounds appealing.
You stay here for an Iowa winter, and you'll make it. I've been here all my life, and I want to go to somewhere where you're at now, but I would be happy if I never had to deal with an Iowa winter ever again.
Yeah, well, from New York originally, and we've got our own variations on that, and it just got to a point where my wife and I said, you know what, I'm done. I'm done.
On the phone, Dee Snider. We're trekking through his new CD, For the Love of Metal. We've already trekked through the first 3 songs, powerful songs, but let's go back to the early stages and the concept of this album. You're writing the album. Did you have at that time a certain sound you were looking for?
This comes, again, I just can't sing the praises of Jamie Josta enough. I said, look, I love contemporary metal, but I don't know. I feel like when I write it, it comes out like I'm imitating. It doesn't come out genuine. In the 80s, when I wrote for Twisted Sister, I wasn't trying to sound a certain way. It was just came out, and it became the 80s sound, part of the 80s sound. So I didn't want to sound like I was imitating other people. So by having these great contemporary bands, like I mentioned, Disturbed, Lamb of God, Killswitch Engage, Jamie Josta and his crew, these younger guns contributing to the record, it really gave it a very contemporary sound and a very genuine sound. And like I said, I'm a huge fan. My kids are all headbangers. They've kept me in touch with the metal scene that's been going on for the last few decades since my heyday. And I've been to shows, I've been to concerts. I love it, and it just feels great to be making music that people are saying, hey, you have a place here. I mean, the album's been number one on the metal charts in the United States for the last 5 weeks. And that's not in retro charts. That's with Five Finger Death Punch and All That Remains and, all these other great contemporary metal bands.
On the phone is Dee Snider. We're trekking through his new CD, For the Love of Metal. And before we get to the next 3 songs on the album, I was reading a quote you said online that said, quote, "This is a really incredibly exciting album that I did not expect to make, especially at this point in my life." What did you mean by that?
Well, when Twisted retired in 2016, I mentally was retiring. I thought that I was done. And the first thing that happened was I was approached by a pop producer to make a mainstream rock record. And I said, you know what, it was kind of a challenge to me, and I like challenges. And I said, all right, let's do that. And I did an album called We Are the Ones, a great record, but it didn't connect. It wasn't, even though I believe I did it really well, it just didn't fit for me. It didn't fit for the audience that likes my, what I do. And then I said, okay, all right, I tried something, I'm done. And then Jamie Josta comes in, he goes, I challenge you. I'm just glad that somebody didn't challenge me to do a children's record, because I probably would have said okay.
Well, that I would love to see. Maybe sometime later, maybe the next 20 years, a Dee Snider children's albums, nursery rhymes. I would buy that.
I actually don't. That's kind of a weird statement to make, because I just sold an animated kids show to Netflix, and I'm writing the music for it. Yeah, I can't announce it formally yet, but we're in development right now. But the challenge was, the approach was making a children's show that parents wouldn't want to kill themselves listening or watching it. And so I am writing the music for that show. And so, but be that as it may. Let's get back to For the Love of Metal.
Let's get back to it.
So he challenged me to do it, and it was, again, completely unexpected. And I actually wasn't sure if the idea would work. Again, we had no record deal, so it was out of our own pockets. And we went in the studio, and we tried a song, and the first one was like, hey, this came out really cool. Better than either of us expected. And then we started doing another track, and over the course of 4 or 5 months, we built an album, again with no record deal, but then every record label, every metal label wanted this record, and there was a bidding war, and it was incredible.
On the phone is Dee Snider. We are trekking through his new CD, album, download, whichever way you want to call it, For the Love of Metal. Let's get to the meat and potatoes of this album for the next 3 or 4 songs. Let's kick off this set with another one of my favorite songs, American Made. Before we hear it, Dee, can you set this song up?
This is one of my personal favorites. It was actually the first song we did. And you'll hear a scream, just sort of a roar at the beginning of the song. It just came flying out of me as the song kicked in the studio. And I remember Jamie Josta and his team looking at each other going, holy crap! Like where did that come from? It's just, but I just felt the power of the song. But the inspiration of the song was the Olympics. We're at a time where it feels like the country's coming apart at the seams. I mean, it really does, but it's not just our country. It's happening in Spain. It's happening in South America. It's happening in England with Brexit. It's all over the world. People are just fed up, and they're electing left people, sort of, different politicians, and it's causing all sorts of unrest within countries. Again, look around the world. It's not just us. But when I watched the Olympics, I noticed that there was no left-wing, right-wing section in the stands, that all the Americans were cheering on the American athletes. And I noticed that in the English section, it wasn't Brexit or no Brexit, they were all cheering for the countrymen. And it kind of hit me that we're a dysfunctional family. Like any family, we fight and we argue and we disagree on things, but God help anybody who challenges the family.
I think the Olympics bring together, not to interrupt you, but I think the Olympics bring together people. If you look at the Winter Olympics from this year, North Korea, South Korea were together. Olympic athletes should not be divided by politics and everything else. They're there.
Well, it gave me hope, And he kind of said, you know what? Christmas at my house, there was nearly a brawl. At Christmas, grandparents, Trump supporters versus non-Trump supporters. But I promise you, if anybody had walked in that room and gone after any member of our family, the entire family would have turned as one and kicked their ass. But it just said watching Olympics gave me hope. And American Made is about that. Let's not forget where we're all from and that we're all part of this great country. And that was how American Made came to be.
Let's hear it right now. Crank it up. American Made from Dee Snider's For the Love of Metal. Well, that was track number 6 called I'm Ready from Dee Snider's brand new CD For the Love of Metal. You can pick it up, in stores, on Amazon. You can download it. I've got it on Spotify. Dee, another great song off the album. Can you kind of enlighten the listeners as to what your thoughts were when you recorded I'm Ready?
Well, this one is really particularly important song. Now Jamie Josta was writing for me lyrically. And this was an unusual thing for me because I always write my own lyrics. But Jamie really studied me. I jokingly say he was like Buffalo Bill in Silence of the Lambs. He was dancing around in a Dee Snider skin suit. But and we talked a lot about the messages and what I wanted to say. And he did an amazing job. But this song was the last song recorded. And it was the week after I buried my mom. My mom was hit by a car during the making of this album.
I'm sorry.
I'm not going for an awe moment, but just shows you how this guy was channeling me. And she became a vegetable for like 2 months, and then she passed away. And one thing Jamie said, do you want to stop the recording? I said, no, because to me, heavy metal has always been that amazing release for the dark emotions we all have, whether it's anger or sorrow. It just gives you a way to just let it out, But I buried my mom, and the week later we were doing the last track on the record, and I'm singing, I'm ready, and suddenly I stopped the session, and Jamie wasn't there that day. Nikki Belmore was producing, and I said, is this about my mom? And he said, yeah, Jamie wrote this for you about your mom. Death leaves a sorrow no one can heal. Love leaves a memory no one can steal. Is the catchphrase in that song. And it was just an amazing gesture on Jamie's part because I wasn't in a place to write a song at that time. But at the same time, it just speaks to how empathetic he was to where I was at during the recording of this album. It was just an incredible experience.
I'm just gonna add this. I did not realize that song was about the passing of your mother. I can sympathize with you. I lost my mom back in 2011. The short of it was, went over for Mother's Day, my wife, my sons, and I to take her a plant and do some housework for her. And she answered the door, and I looked at her, and I'm like, you've had a stroke. And I could just tell it. And within a week, short of it was, she was gone. So I don't think that you can ever get over a passing of a parent, but I think on a mother's side, I think it's even worse, no matter if it's a son or a daughter. So I'm sorry about your loss, but I sympathize with you because I've been through it too.
Thank you. What I like about the song, though, is that it wasn't, usually when people sing about things like this, they sing ballads, and I'm not putting that down. But this was I'm Ready is a very upbeat, aggressive song, and it's almost defiant, saying life can be a bitch, but I'm going to survive and I'm going to make it through. We have no choice about this. It happens to all of us, and sooner or later, these things are going to happen in our lives, and we've got to somehow make it through. And it was a song of empowerment instead of a song of defeat.
On the phone, Dee Snider. We are trekking through in its entirety For the Love of Metal, his new CD. And before we get to the next 3 songs, you've been talking about throughout this interview about Jamie Josta and the guys that you're playing with, but were they always in mind when you started envisioning this record, or did you have certain other people in mind that you wanted to help make this record the success that it is?
I had nothing in mind. I had no plan.
A blank slate?
I mean, yes, but it was such a trust fall for me, because in Twisted Sister I was in total control. I wrote, I created everything, and here I had somebody, a friend of mine, saying, "Hey, man, I believe in you, and I believe that there's a record that you could be made with you that could really connect with people." And I said, "Well, I don't know how to get there." And Jamie said, "Trust me, I do." And I can't say that I just sort of fell back and went, "Yay!" No, it was, it started with one song, then two songs, and as we started recording, that faith and that trust fully built up. And that goes for his team as well. The Belmore brothers, who are playing with me in my live band, by the way, because they helped create this incredible music and their performances are amazing. I didn't know them from Adam. So I had to I was coming into a completely alien situation. I had never met any of the people that I work with on this record except for Jamie. And so it was a challenge for me as well to, it's tough. It's the old teaching an old dog a new trick. I mean, this is it. I say you can't. Well, they did. They did.
On the phone, Dee Snider. As I said, we're trucking through his new CD, For the Love of Metal. Let's get to the next three songs. We're going to kick things off with Running Mazes. Dee, this is track number 7. Can you set this song up?
Running Mazes is a very intense song and very just incredible riff and everything. But the inspiration for this one is from Jamie and my love for Game of Thrones. We were actually
I've never seen it. I hear it's an awesome show, though.
Oh my God! Team Khaleesi. But we were talking about Game of Thrones, and we were talking about this one moment where this swordsman, a teacher to one of the young princesses, teacher says, "What do we say when we meet death? We say, 'Not today, not today.'" And we were just talking about it as sort of a philosophy, and Running Mazes was born.
Here you go. Let's get into it. Running Mazes from Dee Snider's For the Love of Metal. That was track 9, Become the Storm, from For the Love of Metal. New CD out from Dee Snider. Dee Snider on the phone right now. And Dee, we've gotten through almost all the album. Love what I hear. I know the listeners are going to love what they hear. But I'm a guy who likes live music. Are there any plans for you to take this out on the road and support this with some live concerts?
Plans? No. Will we? Yes. The reason there's no plans is because, as you well know, traditionally you get a record deal, you plan to record the record, and you plan when the release will be and the tour, and it's all a long-range, booked in advance thing. Since this record was made on on inspiration and just out of our own pocket, we had no deal. There was no tour plans because we had no release. So it's all sort of happened, and then for the record to connect and react, the shows I have been doing, which were just Dee Snider's that happened to be booked, half the show is my new album because people are demanding to hear the new album. It's just so incredible. So I am doing live shows. I'm in the Northeast this week coming up. I head down to Mexico. Oddly, then I take a break and I join Rocktopia, which is a Broadway production that's classical music and classic rock mashed together, and I'm the rock star in residence, along with an opera singer and Broadway singers. So we're doing a series of shows starting in New York, New Jersey, and then into Pennsylvania and Ohio. And there'll be more coming, by the way. The plan is to do much more touring with that. So we are booking more shows. I have found my place in the contemporary music scene. We're prepared. This winter we're going in to do a follow-up to Love of Metal, which will be For the Love of Metal 2, which will come out next spring. And I'm definitely, we are putting things in motion. So that was a long answer to a short question, but there will be more and more shows as we see this whole project is just taking off, and Dee Snider's back.
Well, Dee, I'll tell you what, we've got some great venues, big and small, for you to play here in Des Moines, so make sure you do not forget the middle of the U.S. in Des Moines, Iowa. Our listeners would love to have you back. I know that you were at the Iowa State Fair a couple years ago on the tour with Dokken, and I believe Winger, and I forget who else was on there. And I heard nothing but just awesome reviews of the show. I was under the weather that night. I couldn't make it. But you've got to put us on that tour, wherever it is, when it starts. You got to have Des Moines on there because you will sell out.
Metal has always lived in the Midwest and the Northwest and the center of the country. It's never been truly a urban music. It's never really been a New York or a California thing, even though the LA scene in the 80s exploded. But for the most part, it has lived and breathed out there. I mean, Slipknot, anybody?
Yeah, from Des Moines.
So, yeah, exactly. So proof and point. So, how could I miss it? I could not.
And I'll tell you, if you make it here to Des Moines for a show, I host a weekly show called The Hairball. And I would love to have you on as a special guest. In fact, I can maybe just let you take the lead, and I'll just be your behind-the-scenes guy.
You'll be my bitch. Good.
I will be your bitch.
You'll be my bitch. This is just tremendous, the coverage you're giving my record at a time where it's really tough to get this kind of coverage. So I thank you guys for the support. I really do.
You've put out some great music. We've been playing a lot of Twisted Sister stuff over the years. So this is kind of our way, my way, KGGO's way to pay you back for everything you've given to us over the years. We're celebrating 40 years on the air this year.
God bless you guys. It's a tough fight sometimes for terrestrial radio, and I'm on terrestrial in 220 markets with my syndicated show. And but when you've got these loyal listeners who have a station like yours that's been around for so long, it's never going to go away. These are the great stations, MMR in Philadelphia, certain stations that have just been, the Riff in Detroit. They will never die.
Yeah. Well, we're in the home stretch, D. You want to finish this out with a bang and finish out this new CD of yours? I mean, not new for you, but new for us because we're hearing it I'm hearing it for the first time now, and some of our listeners are as well. You want to get this finished strong?
Absolutely.
We've got the final 3 songs on the album, which will include at the end the title track, but the hardest way is where we're going to go next. Can you set this song up before we hear it?
I want to set up the next 2. Interestingly, where they're positioned, because these are 2 songs that have incredible guest vocalists on with me. Howard Jones, not from the 80s, the singer from Killswitch Engage and Light the Torch. He sings on The Hardest Way with me. Incredible vocal performance. You'll definitely say, hey, that's not Dee, that's Howard. And he's one of the top singers in the business, right now. And then on the Dead Hearts, one thing I really wanted to talk about on this record is an important subject. It's something I feel very strongly about, and that's fighting bullying, anti-bullying. I'm very aggressive in that. I don't take the passive, just try and talk to him. No, just punch him in the face. I'm one of those guys. But Dead Hearts is the closest thing to a ballad on the record, even though it's up-tempo. And Lisa White Glues, the singer for a band called Arch Enemy, not really well known here, but over in Europe, huge. She does a beautiful vocal performance, and it's really a contrast to mine. I think that song is sort of the Close My Eyes Forever of today. So check all 3 of these songs out.
Well, we'll get to that here in a second. And in the next segment, on our final segment, we will talk about, you mentioned Dead Hearts and about bullying. I've got a question for you about being a dad. I'm a dad too, but let's get to this song, The Hardest Way, right now. Let's crank it up. Dee Snider's new album, For the Love of Metal. Here is The Hardest Way. There you go. We've trekked through the entire album from Dee Snider called For the Love of Metal. You just heard the title track, and of course, Dee and I have spent the last almost hour together, Dee. Thanks for making me a part of the evening.
You know what? Thank you for highlighting and featuring my new album. It's tough to get this kind of attention, even though I think the record is well-deserving. I mean, damn, I was number 20 on the Billboard charts. I haven't been on the Billboard charts since the 80s, for God's sake.
Well, I'm going to congratulate you. My hat's off to you, buddy.
Thank you.
And as I listened to it, I loved it for the first time. I mean, I can't say enough about I Am the Hurricane and Tomorrow's No Concern and the title track and American Made. But what is it about metal that you love so much, and you've loved it for so much a big part of your life?
I am, like I said, I'm OG, day one. First Zeppelin album, day one, first Sabbath album, day one, first Grand Funk album, day one, first Mountain album, Blue Cheer album. I mean, it wasn't even called metal, it was hard rock, and I was there Woodstock didn't speak to me. I hated Country Joe and the Fish and Richie Havens and Crosby, Stills and Nash. Give me the hard stuff. I don't know what happened in the world, in society, around, the late 60s, early 70s, but there became a need for a form of music that expresses the darker emotions, that expresses anger, frustration, anxiety, depression, sorrow, heartbreak, all right? These are really powerful emotions that need to be let out. And it was recently a study, I don't know if you saw it, and this is an absolute fact. Study found that metal fans grow up to be better adjusted adults than non-metal fans.
I hadn't seen that.
This is a fact. Look at it. You'll find it online. And I actually I did an interview with Psychology Today because they were completely perplexed. And they were like, how is this possible? And I said, because we let it out. That negative energy is going somewhere. And it ain't getting released listening to some silly pop band. You know what I mean? So people are fearful of heavy metal because it tends sometimes to be angry and hostile. But, to a man or woman, we don't walk away from a concert or walk away from listening to a metal record and not feel better, not feel lighter, not feel that, we just let it out. So this is why I've always loved it, and this is why I think it's so important. It's still so important.
If Dee Snider had a job where he had to wear a name tag, would it say Dee Snider, pioneer of heavy metal?
No, I think it would say Dee Snider, entertainer. I mean, people ask me what I'd like to see on my tombstone, and I'd like to say he entertained us, because over the years, I have a love for metal for sure, and first and foremost that was my motivation. But I've been on Broadway and I've done radio and movies, TV. I write, I act. I've done so many different things, and it's all been in an effort to entertain people. So I would hope it would say entertainer.
One of the second to last song in the album, we touched on this before we listened to the last three songs, was Dead Heart. You talked about your writing of that song was about bullying. I'm a dad. In fact, my son, Drew, just turned 18 a couple weeks ago. I know you're a dad. And here's a question for you. What would surprise your hardcore fans most about you being a dad?
That I'm as normal a dad as can be, as possible, being, a rock star, but that, I conduct myself and my family. Look, we have a saying in our house, you leave your cool at the door. You know what I mean? And I walk in, and it doesn't matter where I've been or how I've been treated in a positive way. When I walk in the door, it's like, all right, you're dad, you're my husband, you're these kids' father, and act as such. So, we go to all the games and the PTA meetings and the class, the class meetings. I show up, and there are people who look strangely, and they're like, what are you doing here? I go, what are you doing here? Well, it's my kids' open school night. I said, well, it's my kids' open school night too.
Have you ever had a day where one of your kids takes you to school, or maybe even Halloween time, where you decided, you know what, I'm going to dress this up a little bit. I'm going to dress as Dee from Twisted Sister. Have you ever done that or ever thought about that?
No, Halloween was always a night that Twisted took the costumes off. The only night when we were together where we would not dress up was Halloween, which was always a surprise to the audience because most of them were dressed as us. So the lights would come on, and we would look like them, and they look like us. Aha!
Well, Dee, I've had a great time trekking through your album. As I said, I'm a fan. From the first time I heard it, the first time I played it, I am a fan. This is a great metal album. And one final question for you. I know that you said Twisted Sister said farewell in 2016. Is there a chance maybe you guys will reunite? I know with the death of AJ back in 2015, is there a chance maybe in the future for a one-off show or maybe a small tour or something like that?
I can say absolutely not. I've spoken very publicly and very aggressively about my disdain for the bands that do the farewell tour, charge the premium, sell the No More Tours T-shirt, and then come out of retirement a couple of years later. It's to the point where when we announced our retirement, everybody said, yeah, sure. It was like, nobody believes it. And to me, it's not that, the Scorpions pulled it with a 3-year, we changed our mind. Judas Priest, Kiss, Ozzy, the list is endless with these bands. And it's not that I love those bands. Just don't tell us you're leaving. Stay forever.
That's right.
Stay forever. But don't sell us a tour and a T-shirt.
I respect you for that, Dee. I respect you totally for that.
It's not cool. And I made a big deal about that, and maybe some of my band members are hoping. I mean, would I get together at a charity event with the guys and play? We're not going to take it, for the teachers, to cheer them on? Absolutely. Would we go on Jimmy Fallon and do I Want to Rock for the 35th anniversary, Stay Hungry, a special release is coming out next year? Absolutely. A song. I love the guys. I love them. But, but get together and do a full show, a tour, that would be a lie, and I would hate myself for making so much fun of the other bands that pull that crap, and and going back on my own word. And I think Rush did it the best. Rush didn't even say it was the last tour. They just recently have said, I don't think we'll be playing together anymore.
Yeah.
That's it. It wasn't even official. It's just, hey, you know what? Neil's arms are hurting him. Whatever it is, we're not going to do this anymore.
Dee, we love you here in Iowa. The fans love you all over the world. I appreciate the last hour and the time you spent with me and our listeners to talk about this great new album, which is charting very well. It's For the Love of Metal. Dee Snider, have a great rest of your weekend, and thank you very much for the time that you spent.
Thank you, guys. Thank you guys for the support and, support you're showing for new music, which is sadly, rare and not enough. So thank you guys.
Thanks, Dee.
Thanks for listening to the Doug Bailey Podcast. And don't forget to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platform.